You know, these parables from Matthew looked like they'd be pretty fun to preach when I was looking at them back in August. Seriously. Now I'm wondering what in the world I was thinking. The parables of Jesus in Matthew are simple and straightforward stories in the telling and wildly complex and nuanced in the hearing. That's probably why Jesus would say often, "Those who have ears, let them hear." As with most of the parables, there are as many ways to hear this story as there are ears to hear them. Every parable is kind of like a magical diamond mine, a seemingly inexhaustible source of gems of learning. And this parable of a wedding banquet concerns a king. It was a king who invited people to a party, to a wedding banquet, but nobody wanted to come. Jesus says it tells us something about the kingdom of heaven. Let's listen for God's word to us in Matthew 22, verses 1 through 14. Once more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again, he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out to the street and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot, and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may recall that I've told you that every gospel was written for a particular community, and each community had particular needs and a particular history. And Matthew's gospel is no exception. Matthew's community had undergone the trauma of the death of Jesus and his departure, and then the tragic destruction of the temple. It's possible there were other stories in their history that made them hear this parable in a way that we simply can't. Whatever they made of the parable, we certainly aren't required to hear it the way they did, which is good because it's nigh unto impossible for us in our time to understand this story as having anything at all to do with the kingdom of heaven. This can't be the kingdom of heaven, not with that king. Those first people invited, they must know something about that king. He invites them to a wedding banquet, and he's the king. You don't just ignore that invitation, but they do. And they go about their business or beat up the people that brought the invitation. And the king is not happy not happy at all that they've rejected his invitation. We've seen this in our time, sports stars or celebrities who don't like the president and they turn down an invite to the White House. But the king in this story goes after them and burns down the city. And then a new set of invitations go out to all sorts of people, good and bad. And they all come to the wedding banquet. And now we're thinking, whew, it's going to be all right now. But no, Jesus could have stopped the story right there and it would have been great as far as we're concerned. But now there's some poor fellow who didn't have the good sense to put on the wedding robe provided to him by the king, the host. And the king, a very touchy king indeed, as we have seen, has the wedding guest tied up, bound hand and foot, and thrown out into the outer darkness. If this is the kingdom of heaven, and God is the king, I love getting invitations, particularly to fun parties like a wedding. Generally, for me, the wedding itself is work, but the banquet afterward, that's fun. And like most of you, I always wonder two really important things. Who else will be there, and what am I going to wear? Is there anyone I know that's going? Do I have anything ready that I can wear, or do I need to go get something? And obviously, who is going and what they are wearing are matters of some importance to the Christians in Matthew's community. They seem to need to have some clarity on who gets invited, who's welcome and who's not. And we know how that works. Everyone can tell a story of a congregation in which only certain people feel welcome, in which only certain types of attire are acceptable. And some people can tell a story of a church that has kicked someone out who didn't meet their expectations or their cultural norms for their dress or behavior or beliefs. But that doesn't sound like the kingdom of heaven. Another way to think about the story is maybe we don't find God in the character of the vindictive king, but in the character of the fellow who gets thrown out. Like Jesus was thrown out for refusing to conform to the norms. But I think maybe we can find God in the invitation. That second invitation that went out to everyone, good and bad. And the only one who gets kicked out is the one who won't dress up for the party, who won't join fully in the celebration. God is doing this inviting, and we are the ones who are invited, good, bad, ugly, indifferent. And it's a party. It's a banquet. It's a celebration. The kingdom of heaven is like that. And maybe the kingdom of heaven is like this. Listen to this story from the Reverend Tony Campolo. He's a well-known preacher and teacher, and he flew to Hawaii once to speak at a conference, and he arrived at Honolulu and late at night. Went to his hotel and he couldn't sleep and his stomach was growling, and he woke up at 3 a.m. because of the time difference, and he went out into the night prowling around looking for some place to get bacon and eggs for an early breakfast. And everything was closed except this grungy dive down an alley. And he went in, and this fat guy behind the counter comes over and says, "What do you want?" And Tony eyed some donuts under a plastic cover and looked around at the place. He said, I'll have a donut and a cup of coffee. And as he sat there, a group of prostitutes came in and sat down at the counter. They were loud, they were swearing, they were surrounding him, and he was planning to get up and get going, and he heard the woman next to him say, "You know what? Tomorrow's my birthday. I'm going to be 39. And her friend nastily replied, "So what do you want from me? A birthday party, huh? You want me to get a cake and sing happy birthday to you?" The first woman said, "Oh, come on. Why do you have to be so mean? Why do you have to put me down? I'm just saying it's my birthday. I don't want anything from you. I mean, why should I have a birthday party? I've never had a birthday party in my whole life. Why would I have one now?" Tony stayed. And when the women had left, he asked the fat guy at the counter, "Do they come in here every night?" "Yeah." "The one right next to me, she comes in every night?" "Yeah, that's Agnes. She's here every night. Been coming here for years. Why do you want to know?" "Well, she just said that tomorrow is her birthday. What do you think? Could we maybe throw a little birthday party for her right here in the diner?" And a cute smile kind of crept over the man's face, and he said, "That's great. Yeah, that's great. I like it." He turns to the kitchen and shouts to his wife, "Hey, come on out here. This guy's got a great idea. Tomorrow's Agnes's birthday, and he wants to throw a party for her right here." His wife comes out and she says, "That's terrific. You know, Agnes is really nice. She's always trying to help other people out, and nobody ever does anything nice for her." So they make their plans. Tony says he'll be back 2:30 a.m. the next morning with some decorations. And the man, whose name turns out to be Harry, says he'll make a cake. At 2:30 a.m., Tony's stringing crepe paper around the diner and hanging up a sign made of big pieces of cardboard that says, "Happy birthday, Agnes." And Harry had gotten the word out on the streets about the party, and by 3:15, it seemed every prostitute in Honolulu was in the place. It was hookers wall to wall, Campolo says. And at 3:30 a.m., the door swung open. Just like always, in walks Agnes and her friend, and Tony had everybody ready, and they all shouted, "Happy birthday, Agnes!" Agnes was flabbergasted. Her mouth fell open. Her knees started to buckle, and she almost fell over. And when the birthday cake with all the candles was carried out, that's when she lost it. By now she was crying. She was sobbing. And Harry, who's not used to seeing a prostitute cry, gruffly said, "Blow out the candles, Agnes. Blow out the candles. Cut the cake." So Agnes pulled herself together and blew out the candles, and everyone cheered and yelled, "Cut the cake, Agnes, cut the cake." But Agnes looked at the cake, and without taking her eyes off of it, softly, slowly said, "Look, Harry, is it all right? Is it all right with you? I mean, what I want to ask is it okay if I keep the cake a little while? Is it okay if we don't eat it right away? Could I just keep it for a little while?" Well, Harry didn't know what to say. Shrugged. "Sure, that's what you want to do. Keep the cake. Take it home if you want." "Could I?" she said. Looking at Tony, she said, "I just live down the street, just a couple of doors down. I want to take the cake home, and I'll be right back, honest." She picked up the cake and carried it out the door, holding it high in front of her like it was the Holy Grail, Campolo says. And everybody watched in stunned silence. And when the door closed behind her, nobody seemed to know what to do. So they looked at each other, and they looked at Tony, and he got up on a chair and said, "What do you say we pray together?" And there they are, at a hole-in-the-wall greasy spoon, half the prostitutes in Honolulu at 3:30 a.m., listening to Tony Campolo as he prayed for Agnes, for her life, for her health, for her salvation. Tony recalls, "I prayed that her life would be changed and that God would be good to her." When he finished, Harry leaned over, and with just a trace of hostility in his voice, he said, "Hey, you never told me you was a preacher. What kind of church you belong to anyway?" And in one of those moments when just the right words come, Tony said, "I belong to a church that throws birthday parties for prostitutes at 3:30 in the morning." Harry thought for a moment and in a mocking way said, "No, you don't. There ain't no church like that. If there was, I'd join it. Yeah, I'd join a church like that." "What kind of church do you belong to anyway?" Kingdom of heaven's like that. Those who have ears, let them hear.